Hey there, folks, and welcome back for another video. Today, we're doing an Artisan vendor slash spotlight with John Fitzgerald of John Shave Shop on Etsy. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So, John, I want to start off by just asking you what I think everybody asks everyone who falls into this hobby or rabbit hole, some people call it. How did you get into this traditional shaving?
Yeah. So I was a sophomore in college, and I didn't really have much money at all. I had about $50 a week that I could, spend. So disposable, razors were really expensive. So my grandfather had some old straight razors. He had two of them, and he wasn't using them anymore. So I thought I can save myself a lot of money if I can just use these things and not have to buy, those cartridges for 40 or $50 every month or two. So yeah, I got into it like that. Wasn't really a hobby at first. It was just kind of, saving money and
Saving money.
yeah. Yeah, I know.
Did you save money?
At first, maybe, but those were the famous last words. So eventually, I found, so once I graduated, about 2 years later, I graduated, and I was like, I can buy cartridges again, and don't have to, bother with honing this and all that. And I was like, man, the shave sucks. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go back to the straight razor, and at that point, I kind of found out that there was this that it was like a big community. And there was tons of people into it, and there was all this, all this variety and stones, and I kind of got sucked in then.
How long have you been engaged in traditional shaving?
So about 11 years now. So
Okay.
I'm 30 now. I was 19 when I first started.
You're about old enough to be my son. So just to give you an idea of the differences in age here. Let me ask you this. What attracted you to straight razors? Let me go back. What did you start with? What was the first razor you used?
So it was a Genco Geneva cutlery made in Geneva, New York. It was like a 4/8. They call it a wedge, but it was more like a half hollow, maybe a quarter hollow. So I had that, and then I had it was like a German razor, but it was made in Germany. It was called the E. Wasserman or something, kind of like an unknown brand. Again, it was my grandfather's, and it was like a full hollow, 5/8 full hollow square point, and I used those two for years.
Now, let me ask, did you start with straight razors, or did you start with double-edged razors?
Straight razors. Yeah.
Straight into straight razors. How was your first couple of shaves?
Geez. So I remember I was kind of nervous, especially kind of going right over my neck here. So I think the first time or two, I just did my cheeks, and then I finished up the rest with my regular razor. And then, the next time, maybe I did like right here, and I touched up in here. I think by like the fifth shave, I was doing everything, and I never really cut myself. I got to about a dozen shaves, and I felt pretty comfortable. Got a little maybe too comfortable, and I nicked myself probably every shave for the next 3 or 4 months. Little stuff, especially with both of my razors were square points, those menacing tips. So, and then after about 4 or 5 months, I was really comfortable, and I hardly ever nicked myself since.
Well, that's interesting that you jumped straight into straight razors. What was it that got you into, why straights first? Because that is the straights and shavettes. And a lot of people argue shavettes are the absolute top of the food chain in terms of difficulty due to that very thin and sharp blade. Why did you jump right in with straights?
To be honest, I had no idea what a shavette was. I didn't know they existed. If I would have known about that, I would have just got that, so I didn't have to sharpen and hone my blade. And I don't think I knew anything about double edged either because this is like 2009. There was some forums back then, but I just didn't know anything about them. So my grandpa had these two straight razors, and I said, I can make this work. But yeah, if I would have known about either one of those options, I probably would have went that direction. But I was just unaware of it.
So you got your grandfather's two straight razors, and you still have those, I imagine. Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really, really excellent.
I think I have one right around here somewhere if I can find it. Nah, it's probably upstairs
That's all
actually.
right. So let me ask you this, John. Let's talk about the shop just a little bit. So we've talked about you and how you fell into this thing. What services, what are you offering in John Shave Shop? And what's sort of the goal of John Shave Shop?
So, right now, the bread and butter is the razors. That's what I really like to do, restoring, honing, razors. So, I try to provide like a middle option for people because, like, I remember back in 2009, 2010, when I started to get into it, like after I graduated, um, there was no real. You could get a gold dollar or a ZY. They used to have these ZYs back then, which I think were a little better than gold dollars. So you could get those, or you could get like a perfectly restored, vintage razor for a couple $100s. And there wasn't really an option in between. They had like Dovos too for like $150, but none of them came shave ready. There was nothing for like 50, 60, $70, like a good quality option. So I thought, there's tons of unrestored vintage razors out there that I could buy, restore, and hone and offer for a reasonable price. So that's what I really like to do. I'm starting to get more in. I'm starting to offer some of the big Sheffields, like the one that
Yeah.
Joseph Mellon, and those are pricey, but those are my favorite personally. So I'm starting to do more of some higher end razors, but I'm always going to have like the options for like $50. Um, so we're doing that. We started making our own soaps recently over the last, I
Hmm.
guess, 2 months now. I just finished my first batch of aftershave, some bay rum, just a small sample. So it seems pretty good to me. So I'm gonna scale it up and start offering that. And I guess this will be the first place to announce. So I have a friend I'm working with who he's out of work due to COVID right now, and he's a great craftsman. So he's making handmade strops and
Oh,
brushes.
that's awesome.
So I should be getting the first package on Monday. So he's sending me like 5 strops, about 5 different brushes, some Badger, some synthetic. And again, we're going to try to keep the prices fairly reasonable, something like maybe $40 or $45 for a strop, maybe 25 for a synthetic brush, and maybe 35-ish, 40 for a Badger brush.
Let me ask you this, John. What do you look for when you're out scouring eBay and various places, or maybe even an antique store, in terms of a straight razor that can be restored? Let me simplify it a little bit, at least at a start. What are the things that are an absolute deal killer as you're looking at a razor on eBay?
So cracks in the middle of the blade. I can deal with cracks on the toe or the heel. Actually, I could show you one that we did, but I can't. If it's got a crack right in the middle, there's not much we can do. So if you look here, this had a crack right there at the heel.
Hmm.
So kind of put a little. I just grind that section out, and you kind of have like a little modified short blade. So that's the biggest thing. No cracks in the blade and or in the middle of the blade. So that's a big thing. Corrosion along the edge. You can deal with rust, near the spine or on the tang or even on like the middle, like the belly of the blade. But deep corrosion along the edge, you're gonna have to grind back past that to get into good steel. So those are two things. I mean, typically, if you see a crack in the blade, just run, unless it's like really cheap. But for the most part, cracks no good. Big chips, you can definitely hone out small chips, but if you have like a 5/8 razor and you have a chip that's an eighth of an inch or larger, you're not going to have a whole lot of razor left once you finish grinding that out. Um, and I mean, those are the big things. You know, it depends on the scales too. So obviously you can rescale something, but that gets the price starts to go up if you have to get replacement scales and stuff and repin it. So it kind of just depends on what the end result is going to be like.
Hmm.
Um, but those are the big things.
So, John, when you're out there looking for blades, is there a particular brand, particular type of steel that you're attracted to, or that you find you have more success restoring?
Um, there's a particular type that I personally really like, and that's the vintage Sheffields. The brand doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously we all love Wade and Butchers, and Joseph Elliott, Joseph Allen, there's tons of Josephs, Joseph Rogers, George Wasselholm. But I guess back then they were all kind of doing the same thing. So like a 7/8 Wade and Butcher looks very similar to a 7/8 Joseph Elliott. So I personally, those are my favorites. So the brand doesn't really matter that much to me. It's more the grind and the profile. So, give me any 7/8 quarter hollow or wedge barber's notch, and I'll be happy. So yeah, those are my favorites. Those are not the most reasonably priced razors though. So when I'm, looking for razors to restore for the shop, again, the brand doesn't really matter all that much. Vintage US, vintage German, they were all competing with each other. So if you weren't putting out a good product, they're going to drive you out of business. This is back in the 1850s, late 1800s, early to mid 1900s, when quality was really important. Nobody thought the way that people think today, whereas, I'm going to buy this crappy whatever and I'll just throw it out in a year and I'll buy another one every year for the rest of my life. People bought stuff, that was going to last a lifetime. So, and another way I kind of think about it is if it's lasted this long and somebody didn't throw it in the garbage 100 years ago, it must be decent quality. So again, it's more about like if you're looking for a full hollow, a 6/8 full hollow, the brand doesn't matter that much. People love like, Double Duck and Boker and stuff like that. But I've had probably, I don't know, 50 or 100 vintage German razors that, relatively unknown brands that shave just as well, if not better than certain Dovos or Bokers or Double Ducks. So, I mean, brands are cool, especially if you're a collector or, something like that. But it's mostly just, just anything really, that looks like a deal that I can get for a reasonable price and then can turn around and restore it and then offer it at a reasonable price.
Let me ask you this. If you were to be recommending a razor to a brand new straight shaver, what sort of blade would you recommend? In other words, grind, square tip, round tip. I know typically they like to recommend round tips so you don't get yourself with the edges, but what's the type of razor you generally would recommend for a new straight razor shaver?
Something like this. This is a Genco. It's like a 6/8 round point, full hollow, half hollow. I think the round points are really good for new people. Sometimes I'll nick myself with a square point, even still after all this time being careful. So, or a barber's notch. I think a barber's notch is kind of like a good in between. In between, somebody was just calling me. Sorry.
That's okay.
So it's kind of like, I think in between a round point, but more precise than a round point, but not as menacing as a square point. So yeah, I think a 5/8 or a 6/8 or even a 4/8. Anything from, I don't think the grind really matters that much. I probably wouldn't recommend like a super extra hollow, something just like a half hollow, full hollow, round point, 4/8 to 6/8. It would be my suggestion. Brand doesn't really matter that much. But
what's your favorite type of razor in terms of grind, size, and so on? What do you prefer to use?
My absolute favorite, I have it's a 13/16 Wade and Butcher. It's one of those, the celebrated hollow ground razor. It's etched on there, and it's a quarter hollow barber's notch, horn scales. I really like a quarter hollow. I prefer it, ever so slightly over a near wedge. They're just not all that common. There's tons of wedges out there, thick, and I really enjoy those also. But yeah, if I could get more of those, I would, preferably like a 7/8 or an 8/8. That's my favorite. And then second would be just a typical near wedge, 7/8, 8/8, anything over 13/16 really, and I'm happy.
One of the things that I learned recently myself is if you have a full wedge, it's a little bit different to use that razor than it is hollow,
Yeah.
because that hollow allows for a different angle, I think. Whereas a wedge, if you set it on your face flat, the blade can't really cut if it's flat on your face. So you have to angle it. I didn't realize that when I was using a full wedge recently. And then I said, oh, I gotta adjust my angle a little bit because of the grind of this razor.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You have to hold that at a bit of a steeper angle, than, maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 degrees, a little bit higher than you normally would. But I think those are just the smoothest shavers.
So, John, let's talk about honing a little bit. And the one thing that I've learned about honing so far is every person I talk to seems to have different techniques, different standards, different philosophy.
Yeah.
What's your general honing philosophy? And by that, I mean, what's your approach to honing? What are your preferred stones? So on and so forth.
I mean, it kind of just depends on the razor. I think every razor kind of has to be treated differently. So say we're gonna, if I was gonna hone like one of those big wedges, those typically, in my experience, some of that older Sheffield steel doesn't hone up that well on the really hard J-nats. Like I have this Ozuku here that's just glassy hard, and it microchips a lot of those old edges. So I typically finish those on softer stones like an Escher. I have good success on like a conical with those. But like some of the, if I was going to hone like a German razor or vintage US, which I think are very similar, they both had, shoulders and stabilizers, thin hollow grinds. So usually, I mean, I'll start out with, I have like 6 different bevel setters depending on the steel that I'm dealing with. So, I mean, I'll either set the bevel on a Chaucera 800 or a Chaucera 1000 or a Shapton Pro 1000 or 2000 or Glass 500 or even a DMT, depending on, how tough the steel is, I guess. I mostly use the Shapton Pro stones. So like, my standard progression is 1000, 2000, 5000, 8000. And depending on what the finishing stone is going to be. So if it's going to be a J-nat, I'll stop at 8,000 and I'll go to the J-nat, either with like a Macau and Nagura progression or straight to the Tomo and do a couple Tomo dilutions. If I was going to go to a conical, I probably would have jumped off at like 5K. If I was going to finish on an Escher or an Arc, I'm going to get it as sharp as possible before. So I'm going to go up to like a 12K synthetic, and then go to the Escher, or a surgical black arc, or I have like a French La Luna stone, relatively unknown. Not a lot of people know about them. Same thing though. You try to get it as sharp as possible before. So, and I also have a 30K Shapton. So I would just go straight through the synthetics if I was going to do that. But,
what's the edge like coming off of that 30K Shapton?
It was kind of underwhelming, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you hear like 30,000, you're like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's just because I've been spoiled with all these natural stones for a long time. I mean, the Shapton has its benefits. It's really fast. All you need is like 10 laps on it, and you're good to go. It puts a pretty nice edge on the razor. I think most people would happily shave with it. It's smooth. It's really keen. But I don't get all that excited about synthetic edges. It just kind of boring to me, I guess. So yeah, it was.
Let me ask you a question. Let me jump in. I'm sorry to interrupt. A lot of people debate synthetic finishers versus natural. What's your preference and why? I think we've already established your preference is natural, but why is that?
I just, the synthetics are good because they're repeatable and consistent. So you also have Shapton Pro. So I could basically tell you exactly how many laps to do, how much pressure to use. and you could probably get the similar results. Whereas naturals, I have 3 cauticles here. Each one is different. Each one, the hardness is different. Each one, I have to use different amounts of pressure. One's faster, one's slower. So there's a lot more. I guess it's a little more challenging, a lot more variables. I don't know how exactly to describe this, but they also can be manipulated more too, and like to be used in different ways. So that's one thing. I enjoy honing on them more just because it's a little bit more challenging, but it's just more fun to me too. And also the history of them. Like most of these stones are old, but they haven't mined Eschers since the 1930s. So there's a lot of history with them. And the JNATs too. It's like a whole different world. I mean, natural stones are kind of a rabbit hole. JNATs are a whole rabbit hole within a hole, because there's all different kinds of JNATs from different mines and different stratas, and just so there's just a lot more. It's just a lot more fun to me honing on them. And then the edges, I think, are just better. Not that you can't get a nice smooth edge off of a synthetic. You definitely can. I did that for years before I had all these different natural stones. So yeah, it's just more fun to me, honing on different naturals and trying different things and trying to max out each one and learn each stone. Because no 2 of them are the same. There's a lot of.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to put you on the spot now. If you could only pick one finisher, knowing that you're honing everything out there, and that's all you had, if you were choosing one, what would be your favorite? I understand that's very difficult, but I got to ask, because people want to know.
That's a tough question. I used Eschers, Thuringians, however you want to pronounce it, for years. That was like, I thought I found the holy grail of razor hones when I got my first one. And I think those are probably my favorite. They tend to work, I guess, with pretty much everything. And the edge that they put on is just superb too, in my opinion. It's just like a great balance of smooth and keen. They're fast. They're fairly easy to use. So I guess I'd probably go with an Escher.
Excellent. Got another question for you. Strops. A lot of people have different philosophies and feelings about the types of leather, whether it be horsehide or cowhide or whatever the case may be, kangaroo. Mm-hmm. Do you discern any actual performance difference in terms of the edge based on the type of strop that you're using? Like, have you seen a big discernible difference in the type of strop?
No. And I have various types of horsehide, Latigo, other kind of steer hide. I think I have like 5 or 6 different strops. I've never really been able to tell much difference at all between the different types of leather. You can feel it when you're stropping. I think horsehide is the draw is much lighter and it almost feels smoother than cowhide, but the end results, not really much difference. Maybe a little bit with different types of linen. There's like flax linen and cotton linen and different types of fabric, denim, that are used for the linen strops. And some people say that cauticle edges do really well with flax linen. That might be true. It's so close though that I haven't really been able to tell much difference.
Let me ask about the stropping process itself, because one of the things that people struggle with when they're starting out is pressure, how much pressure. And everybody always says it's the weight of the blade, which is a really hard thing to do. And sometimes really hollow blades are so light that it almost won't stay on the strop if it's just the weight of the blade. What's your process? How many laps do you typically do after shaving or before a shave? And how would you try to explain, if you could, the amount of pressure you're using?
I definitely don't use like super heavy pressure, but I probably use a little bit more than just weight of the blade. And I kind of vary it too when I'm stropping, like the same thing with honing. So I use a little bit more in the beginning, and then when I'm finishing up, I get lighter. So it's a little bit more than weight of the blade. Towards the end, though, I do get pretty light, and I also make it more taut towards the end. So I might give it a tiny bit of slack in the beginning, and then kind of tighten up at the end and also lighten up the pressure. As for laps, I'm really lazy with stropping. My shoulder starts to get sore after a while, so I probably do, after a shave, I do maybe 30 or so laps on linen, and maybe 25, 30 on leather. And I do a little more post when I finish honing. I'll probably do 40 or 50 on linen and 40 or 50 on leather after I finish that initial honing.
I got another question for you. We've heard people reference letting the steel rest after a shave, as if it's a ribeye that's been taken out of the oven. I don't understand that at all, but I wanted to get your take on it.
I think I might have heard that once before too. I don't know anything about that. I don't let it rest. It's steel. So, I mean, steel can get like certain types of like metal fatigue and stuff like that, but that's mostly with like, not really with straight razors. I mean, it could happen theoretically on a stone, but not really. I mean, definitely not shaving. So I don't really know why you would need to let the steel rest.
Yeah, I found that to be an odd claim. And, my perspective is do whatever you want to do with it. It's your razor, it's your strop, do whatever. If you think it helps it to let it rest, then let it rest. But it's not a ribeye you're taking off the grill that needs to rest so the juices can be in. It's a little bit odd for me.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that and see I'm sure there's a theory behind it, so I'd like to know what it was.
Back to honing. What would be your advice for people who are brand new to honing, starting out? I mean, just general considerations, things you want to be very careful about. If a couple of things stand out.
I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are new to honing because, a lot of people who buy my razors are brand new to straight razor shaving in general. And I'm also, I try to stay fairly active on the various Facebook groups like razor honing and straight razor honing. And a lot of new people post there, and I try to help a lot of people. So, I mean, I typically suggest the stones that you have, the Shapton Pros, because not only are they cheap, I mean, you can get the full set, 1,005, 8, and 12 for, I think it fluctuates between $217 and $234. And so they're, if you compare that to like a set of Choceras, you're going to pay $600. Shapton glass, you're going to pay $400 or $500. Even the Nanawa Superstones, I think it's like $305, and I think that's for the 10 millimeter, not even the 20 millimeter stones. So they're cheap, but they're also great. I mean, they're also, in my opinion, the best for honing razors because they're really hard. They cut a really crisp bevel. They're fast. They don't wear. So that's usually my suggestion for people getting in is start with synthetics. Get to know honing that way. Put a good edge on your razor and then get into naturals. Because if you go and buy a cuticle right off the bat, like I said, each cuticle is different. So we can give you like roundabout recommendations on how to hone on it, but nothing exact. Whereas with the synthetics, every Shapton Pro 1K is pretty much exactly the same. So anyone who's familiar with them can give very precise advice to people that are trying to learn. So that's one thing. I say always start with synthetics and then kind of branch off into naturals later on. And just watch videos. There's lots of good videos on YouTube on honing, and forum posts too. I think there's a lot of good info on various forums that you can learn about honing, and just hone too. Just do it. Do a lot of it. That's how you get better at it. If you have some really nice razors, don't hone those first. Go on eBay. I see all the time, lots of like 5 razors for like $35. So you can get yourself 5 vintage razors that you don't really care about if you mess them up. and just practice. It's really hard to really screw it up. Like if it doesn't come out perfect, you can go back and try it again. So yeah, just practice and have fun. That's the biggest thing.
Let me ask you this. Some folks also have different feelings about whether you can touch up a razor. That is to say, go back to say an 8,000 or 12,000 and then hit it on the finisher, as opposed to going all the way back for bevel reset. What are your feelings about that? Can you touch up a razor?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even go down to 8K. If I had a razor that was finished on, say, an Escher, and I shaved with it a bunch of times and I felt that the edge was starting to tug, I just go back to the Escher. It's rare that I would drop back down, especially back down. Once you set that initial bevel, for the most part, you really don't have to do that again. I mean, sometimes maybe the edge rounds a little bit from stropping. But for the most part, yeah, you can just go back to your finisher again and touch it up. At least
I
in
know.
I'm
sorry.
And going way back to when I first started this, all I had was a barber's hone. That was my grandfather's. So I touched my razors up on that thing for like a couple years, 2 or 3 years. And
how do you feel about pace and so on?
I think they're great for people who are new to honing. It kind of like bridges the gap in skill. So if like you don't totally nail the stones, the paste can help overcome that a little bit. It's not like, magic by any means, but I do think it's good for new people. And it can really help out. And it also, I think the other place it has is smoothing out synthetic edges. So like finishing on, say, that Shapton, the Shapton Pro 12,000, the shave is not, it's okay. It's not bad, but 10 laps on 0.5 micron chromium oxide paste on a balsa strop really smooths it out and really gives it a nice edge. Most people would not complain about that edge. So yeah, finishing after synthetics, the chromium oxide paste, but also you can basically keep a razor going almost indefinitely with just a balsa strop with some kind of submicron abrasive on there, whether it's diamond, chromium oxide. There's a whole bunch of other different kinds too, but a lot of people keep their razors going basically indefinitely with that. Either you wait until you feel the edge start to tug a little bit, or try to do it on like a maintenance level, like maybe every 15 shaves or so, do a couple laps on that balsa strop. And then, I know a lot of people that have kept razors going for, I guess, years just doing that. So it's a good thing for not, if you don't want to spend a bunch of money on stones.
All right, we're going to put you on the spot again. When are we going to see more stock in the shop?
Jeez, that's a tough one. So I think right now I have like 5 razors listed on there. In my shop right now, I have probably 40 of them that just need to be restored and honed. So it's a slow process. Like last night I did one, I finished work at, say, 5 o'clock, and I was down. My wife lets me stay down here until 8. So I have 3 hours after work, and I finished one razor. So it's not the fastest process. So especially, because I try to do a good job with them. So, and that's not even honing. That's just the restoration part. Sometimes I can do 2 of them in one night. So the problem is when I put up like a Wade and Butcher or a Boker or one of the name brands, somebody buys it within like hours. So I think when you first mentioned me, when you bought that first razor from me and did that video, I was able to keep like 20 razors in stock at one time. And I can't get back to that.
Well, people are finding your shop now, evidently.
Yeah. And I was
doing a good problem to have.
Demand was pretty good before this, but yeah, ever since it's hard to keep my stock much higher than like 5 or 6 razors. So just check in regularly, because I'm always putting new stuff up. As soon as we get off here, I'm going to put up this new 6/8 little Sheffield full hollow with horn scales. That's really nice. And I have a bunch of other stuff that'll just slowly go up, every day or every couple days.
Well, John, do you have anything else you would like to share with the audience, be it on traditional shaving, straight razors, honing, anything you'd like to share, or about your shop?
I guess just have fun, and as you said, there's so many different ways to hone a razor, but I always say, if you like your edges, you're doing it right. So even if your method is like totally unconventional, if you're getting good shaves, that's all that really matters. So, don't let some person tell you that what you're doing is wrong because it doesn't follow, the normal, method or process. So, just that, do a lot of honing and have fun.
Oh, I couldn't have said that better. I think it is really, when it comes down to it, all about having fun. I want to thank you so much for joining us. I want to thanks for you and your help has been really valuable to me in my honing journey. I really like that you've started including that paper
Yeah.
with your oars, which talks about whether you've used tape or not, the finisher, the type of blade. I think that's really valuable. And I look forward to seeing more stock in the shop. And I hope people will go over and look and see what you have to offer. I will link your shop below. And I just want to thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.